Good evening and welcome to the Cleveland Heights, University Heights City Schools District Board of Education meeting for the 3rd of September 2024. Jody Serini is away, so I will be serving in her stead to run the meeting. Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hines.
Here.
Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Ms. Serini. Mr. Trimble.
Here.
Ms. Crenshaw.
Here.
And we will begin with awards and recognitions. Ms. Kirby.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to put on your
Yeah, I
jacket
do.
for this.
Thank
This is important.
So, good evening and welcome, everyone. Tonight, I'd like to recognize 2 students and 4 Metro Health school-based team members who aim to advance the mission of school-based healthcare. In July, the group attended the annual Youth Advisory Training Program in Washington, D.C. The 2 students, Addison Hart and Deshara Turner, who is in college at University of Cincinnati, had the opportunity to work alongside Metro Health to create and deliver a presentation detailing the work of the Heights High Youth Advisory Council. The students' presentation was thorough and interactive and even included a simulation where small groups had to budget for food and other essentials. The council has worked over the past year to address food insecurity within our community. The Metro Health team members mentored and guided Addison and Deshara in the Youth Advisory Council and helped them grow as young leaders. When I call your name, please come up to get your certificate and take a group photo. Kelly Blevins. Alvernice Ford. Betsy Martinez. Clarice Willaford. Addison Hart. And as I said, Deshara can't be here with us tonight because she is at the University of Cincinnati. So we will take a group photo.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. That concludes our awards and recognitions. We will be back to our Tiger Team Members of the Month next month now that school has started.
If people in the back would like to come sit down, there are 7 empty seats in the front. Just offering.
So I've got a motion to amend our agenda, which would be to move new business before public address.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll, please? As soon as you can type that out. Sorry.
Yes, I wanted to. Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Okay. So next we will have new business. And who has new business?
I do have some items for new business. I want to address our hot weather from last week. I did just put some information together to make it easier for people to understand. So I'm going to ask Kathan to present it. My computer is like blowing up, so let me see. I'll just go old school on my phone. All right, so thank you all, and thank you all for coming tonight. I know that there were concerns about the hot weather, so I wanted to give some background to the board, the community, our staff on a proposal for hot weather days. But before doing that, I want to go back and talk just a bit about our preparation for the warm days last week. Actually, it was last May that a couple teachers from the schools, there was a day that was really, I can't remember the day now, but there was a day that was really hot. And so teachers reached out with their concern about how warm it is and how difficult that was. And so as we started to look at the weather for last week, we did actually start to engage in planning to see how we could manage those days. So just wanted to share some of the steps that I went through with my team. The first is we looked at the National Weather Index for the hourly heat forecast. There's lots of different weather forecasts. We use the National Weather Index because that's the federal guidelines. And then the team visited all the schools to identify the warmest rooms. So there are different rooms in the school buildings that get warm. Sometimes it's based on the sun. Sometimes it's based upon, where they are in the school. So we wanted to make sure that we had a sense of where those rooms were. So if we needed to move kids, we knew the rooms to target. We then engaged with leaders to ensure there were cooler spaces where students could go to if they were in those warmer rooms. So that may have been the lunchroom, it may have been the gym. We even had some students who were at Noble Library because that's air conditioned. They partnered with us. We identified some spaces at Rocksmith too as well. At one point, I was talking to leaders about if necessary, we could transport kids to some of our air conditioned buildings, but we didn't have the need to do that because we were able to move kids. Of course, we provided water, we provided fans, opened windows to cool off the rooms as much as possible. And then we shared the communications of those plans with both our families and our staff. We did monitor temperatures throughout the day. I know that there were teachers who had their own thermometers, but we also have a central system where we're able to manage that and monitor that as well. We also had members of central office out at the buildings. It's really important that we feel the conditions and kind of really see how it felt. So we were out there, at those buildings on those warm days. And then we rescheduled the not report card pickup, what is it? Curriculum night to from the 27th to September 4th, because on the 27th, it was like that was at the hottest point of the day that day, so we moved that. So just wanted to share some observations from that day. First of all, the warmest part of the school day began around 2 o'clock, so it kind of would tick up around 1 or 2 this is a National Weather Index that I'm going by. So according to the National Weather Index, that was the warmest part of the day. We did have rooms that reached temperatures over 90 degrees. And so, we were asking principals just to make sure that those rooms got relocated as that was identified. We definitely saw, and it was expressed, it was hard to teach and learn in the warmest rooms, which is why we wanted to have those cooling spaces identified. But even in terms of those cooling spaces, I got some feedback that it was hard to teach there because people didn't have their materials and all those kinds of things. And then, you had kids kind of moving around too, so it definitely wasn't conducive. Air-conditioned spaces or cooler spaces were helpful in providing relief. And when we looked at the attendance, I anticipated a big dip, but actually our attendance on Tuesday on average in those hot schools only was 94%. And then on not Wednesday, that would be Friday, it was 92% on average across those schools. I think the lowest school on Tuesday was 91%. The lowest school on Friday was 89.5%. So I think this is helpful in knowing that, we all share wanting to make sure that our students learn in, conducive climates and that our staff work in conducive climates. So the proposal as we move forward, because the climate is only going to get hotter as the earth warms up, is that we adopt for those warm days at those non-air conditioned schools a half-day schedule. A half-day schedule will allow us to teach up until, those really, really high points, ensure that students get breakfast, and ensure that they get lunch as well. There's a parent that reached out to me today who was really concerned about the heat, and one thing that she shared was that for her and her husband, it would have been difficult to, change schedules, but they would have managed. And the parent also acknowledged that she knows in some instances, school is a really important component of students' lives for like nutritional reasons, right? So her observation. Well, if we go to a half-day schedule, then that will allow for instruction, but also the other needs as well. Now, there'll still be some logistics that we have to work out. So we need to work out transportation, and we would also need to work out what those schedules would look like. But I do think that it'll help us really ensure that kids are getting instruction during the optimal time. Now, kids have different schedules in elementary schools, so it's like for me, I would really want to prioritize, English, math, science, and social studies if we're able to do that within the schedules, and then we can, kind of figure out how we would incorporate specials and maybe do some kind of makeup. Not that I want to plan the whole thing right now, but just some things that I'm thinking of. So that is the proposal, and I just want to remind everyone, we do have curriculum night for the elementary schools that has been moved to tomorrow from 5:30 to 7:30. So any kind of questions or observations?
Well, first off, this is not a proposal that needs to be acted upon tonight, is it?
No, it is not.
No, it's still a work in
I
progress.
also wonder if there is the opportunity to add an alternative for working families, that this half-a-day schedule may not be conducive to their families.
Yeah, that's also something that, just with some district leaders I've been talking about to see how we can develop some partnerships for those parents too as well.
Now, during COVID, we were able to offer remote learning at Wiley with adult supervision for children who couldn't be left at home unsupervised. I don't know, I mean, that was a big enterprise to make it
and we
work.
worked with Right at School. We might be able to work with Right at School or do a contract.
Well, I
with
would
them
think
or
that
something
if some students are participating in the Calamity Day, then it would leave more space in those cooler spaces.
if they go for the half day. Yeah.
How would how would your plan impact two things? One, just sort of our total when it came to calamity days and having to make up days.
Well, the half day, whatever those hours were, would go into the count. But for elementary schools, we have cushion for calamity days. So I don't think the half day program would impact that greatly.
And then also for the, how would this interact is a better question with the state in terms of attendance, student attendance and chronic absenteeism and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, we would just have to, Sharon Roller would be able to kind of make those adjustments. They're still counting our hours. A half day she would have to make an adjustment, I believe, in just the way that day has been designated, because we wouldn't want kids to be counted as half day absent. And we've had half day. My understanding is we've had half day schedules before at the elementary schools, so that is something that we can learn from as well in terms of how that was done.
So, I mean, we're really talking about like some like Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of stuff here. Like this is something that I think that as a board and as a district, we need to find a solution to, because I mean, I know my daughter went to Noble. Everyone knows Noble gets hot. I don't know, I mean, I didn't look at the last 10 years of data or anything, but it has seemed like it gets hotter and it stays hotter longer. This is not a problem that's going to go away. And this one, unlike snow calamity days or cold temp calamity days, particularly cold temp in the morning, we can typically spot this one coming days away. So I mean, I feel like we should be able to come up with a system in which the district is position to make a call with plenty of lead time to not just call the day, but also to make a good communication to the families of what their options are. Because as I read this proposal and hear some of the conversation, it sounds like we're talking about options for potential transportation, options for
Yeah.
you sent your kid to school and now your kid's showing up somewhere else and you've got to pick them up for an appointment, like all of that sort of stuff we should be able to get way out in front of. On Friday last week, because there's a lot of discourse on the internet about temperatures in the schools, I work from home. I've got a westernly facing window, and before we got like full sun coming in my window, I turned off my air conditioner, and I had a project that I was working on for work that required a lot of my attention and focus, and I made it about 35, 40 minutes before I had to turn my air conditioner back on because I personally couldn't focus. And so, and I grew up in a house without air conditioning. And that was a lot of the other discourse on the internet was, back in my day, blah, blah, blah. But these would have been days where my mom would have dropped us off at the Dollar movie theater and said, you're seeing 3 movies today because I'm not putting up with you kids in the house. Yeah, and that's I was oldest of 6 kids. And I think particularly about younger elementary grades, forget it. Like, there's no way. We might as well call it what it is, which is it's a calamity day, whether it's happening in a super hot classroom or if it's happening because they're not going to get any teaching. So.
Yeah, I think that, the weather conversation is interesting because I literally was like watching it every hour on the hour. Sometimes weather does change, so, it's something you always have to watch. But I do think if we use this year as kind of a teaching tool, we can identify, moving forward, Tuesday's a day, let's just let parents know we're going to have a half day. Friday's a day, let's just let parents know, have a plan already communicated, already have the transportation routes worked out. So, for those kids who are getting transported, they can get picked up and dropped off too as well, so.
There are also rooms, there really are rooms that are far hotter and far colder than others. And I think that that's something that we've probably just never really planned around in terms of, where our kids, throughout the day in these rooms. And the more kids you have in a room, the harder it is. The hotter it is, the less fresh oxygen there is. So I think that really just beginning to look at this as something that we really need to study as we're also sort of dealing with on the fly. I was thinking today, we have a plan for if there's a tornado, here's where this classroom evacuates to in the building. And this is I was sort of thinking along those lines that we almost need to develop something like that for days like this. Sort of an alternate building use schedule. And perhaps even alternate use of buildings schedule, because we do have a building attached right here that has large spaces that are air-conditioned.
Yeah, I think that, agreed, we were looking at using that space too. I think that kind of doing that, we can, again, build on what we've learned and look at that schedule to see how we can take all those factors into account for planning, for sure.
Were there any medical issues reported from
Now,
students?
I did ask for specific numbers. I don't have, I've heard 1 or 2 principals may have said that there were some students that were sent to the nurse. I don't have an exact count. We have asked if there's any other additional information for principals to share as it relates to that. I don't know if we have a process where we, like on IC, that's probably something we probably could have though on IC, just so we can track that, not only that information, but other kind of information too in terms of number of students who are seeing the nurse and those kinds of things for particular issues.
So the other thing, I already mentioned, parent communication and all of that. So this is not the National Weather Service, this is the weather app on Phil's iPad, but Thursday is the high this week, Thursday's high of 82. I would hope that we're not gonna, and, this isn't the heat index, but I would hope that we are through the worst of it for the fall. If that is the case, I would love to see us be proactive and get communication out in the fall, and then be able to reiterate upon that in the
Yeah, when we
spring
have those processes.
when we would feasibly have more hot weather days.
Yeah, when
climate
I
days.
when I looked at the National Weather Service for 45 days out, it looks like we've had the hottest weather for the season so far. So getting something, having a plan so that parents can anticipate that and we can kind of work through the logistics is something we can certainly do.
Is this,
Especially because last summer started surprisingly early,
yeah, it did.
and we were all caught off guard by some very hot weather early in the season, and this gives us the opportunity to be ready next spring.
Yeah.
Liz, I wonder if this might be an additional piece that you want to add to your wellness committee? To sort of oversee these efforts?
Sure,
It's
it
just
could be
an, just an
yeah,
idea.
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about this, there's, families and considerations that I'm sure we're not even talking about mostly off the top of our heads. And I know that we've got some survey fatigue that happens from time to time in the district, but I feel like this would be a good one to target to families in those not a district-wide, but to target soon, if we can spin it up quick enough to get something out, to get some family feedback of what was it like, and if the district did a half-day program, if there was pickup happening at whatever time of day, how would that impact your family? Particularly if, and this is the kind of tricky thing to communicate, if it's just for these certain buildings, and your kid from the middle who normally walks home and picks up the littles on the way home, or the high schooler who drives and picks kids up,
Right.
isn't there to do so, and who's going to do it? and
Critically important.
What's the
Yeah.
plan? So, we could hear some of that.
Yeah, we have models from COVID where we got feedback like that, provided child care. That's how actually some of the child care after COVID came, because there are parents who just really struggle with kids not being in school. So we can use some of those models.
Would guidelines be established as well? For example, like if the temperature is above X, I assume maybe it's like that. If it's a certain, negative temperature, will we establish like those same type of parameters and guidelines?
Yeah, we don't really have parameters for high or low temperatures. I can tell you that, because first of all, you have kind of different factors that are impacting that. Humidity, heat index, et cetera. But even on the cold side as well, a lot of it depends upon when the weather's supposed to hit, what the streets are like. So every decision for a calamity day is like a pretty detailed decision of like my team and I really looking at the conditions and making those decisions. And that's how, most districts do it as well. So, but we keep, we also kind of, past precedent learn
Trends,
from, kind of previous things as well. I'll say for the winter, the first team that really knows what's going on the ground is a grounds team, because they're here the earliest. There are people who are watching 1, 2 in the morning, clearing snow, and so we have a sense of how, if we're going to be able to clear, how fast the snow's coming, like those kinds of things too, conditions of the streets and all those pieces. So
I think that we should include in those considerations for the warm days, getting those first people in the building, identifying which windows need to be opened first, which rooms' windows need to be opened first. Because locking them up locks in the warm air, but if we open up those windows in the coolest part of the day, it can make a big difference.
yeah, we started actually doing it between overnight. the
Yeah.
night
Yes,
before,
yeah.
yes,
too,
I was
as
going
well.
to say that it's important to
Yeah.
open the windows at night when it cools
Yes.
off, and then close them back in the morning before the heat
Although,
comes in.
then you're also dealing with mosquitoes and bees. Is George here? I thought I saw George around. Anybody see George lurking outside in the
He may
hallway?
have stepped out to,
There he, I thought for a moment you might be the smartest man alive. So I think it would be helpful, just in terms of reminding the community, we did a pretty extensive.
Do we need
Okay.
George at a mic? Is George going to respond?
Yes, George, we're
Yeah.
going to need you in front of a mic. So George and his team did a very extensive study of what it would take to air condition the buildings that are not air conditioned. And I saw just sort of on social media this week, totally legitimate inquiries about, well, why don't they just do it? And George, tell us why we don't just do it.
Well, I think and I could be off my numbers, but we range everywhere from $4 million to, and I can't remember the top number, but it varies based on what you want to do. The $4 million, if I'm not mistaken, was to put just window air conditioners in the building. The problem with doing that and why it's so expensive, we just can't go to Home Depot and put one in, is our electrical in these buildings is from 1920s, 1930s. That all has to be upgraded. So that's the biggest cost.
Right. So we, as of today, so we would love to upgrade it, just to whoever said that. We would love to upgrade it. The problem that we run into is that our PI budget is really, really taxed. And we would need to go to the community to do even the most basic. And that may be what ultimately is necessary. But we just need to sort of say it out loud that it would be a big, big, big lift that is not guaranteed. So I think that that's part of sort of what we're talking about as a component of this.
Well, there are multiple factors, right? I mean, upgrading the electrical service to each building
Correct.
is something that we cannot do. It has to be done by the electric company first, right? Then you've got to rewire the interior of the building to get that new power to where you need it in each classroom. That's where you start needing, well, where are the electricians? We don't have enough of those right now. And then the actual equipment is the third factor. So, it's the service, the labor, and the equipment.
And the life cycle of window machines, we know.
Those are garbage.
Yeah.
The best solution was, I think, the most expensive, of course, and that's putting like rooftop systems in that handle the whole building. Then you're providing forced air throughout.
Well, I think if we were to go to the community and ask for window units, then we should just ask the community for a new school.
I agree. I would agree. I think
That's a problem with debt capacity then.
Yeah, we could also
Yes.
ask the state why they're spending money to build new schools, but that's a different story.
Before we lose you, George, and this is not a put you on the spot question, but next time you're in a position to do so, and we're talking about facilities in a meeting or a work session, I would love to know the potential logistics of, let's say, the money falls out of the sky, or, the Kelseys can't find enough ways to give their money to us. If something like that were to happen, what would logistically it look like? Was this a thing where we would, if we were to do something like that, would we have to shut buildings down for X amount of time during normal instruction time periods? Is this something that could be accomplished when there aren't people in the buildings, like those
It
sorts of things?
depends on which option we
Yeah.
took. You would probably, to do the highest, the most expensive one, which would be put rooftops, you'd have to close a building. You couldn't do that over a 2-month time frame. It could potentially be an issue even doing the electrical in a building in that window. There's probably a lot of work that could be done behind the scenes, but then they have to pull wire from the basement, through the walls, up into each classroom. I mean, it would be challenging to do in a 2-month time frame. You would be better off closing the school down for a year and then doing that type of modification to it than getting equipment. Look, we went through for Boulevard. I mean, we were pushing,
Right.
the edge of the envelope to get those units in, and they came in just on time.
So I have the proposal, it's from April of
Yes.
2022, I just pulled it up too.
And so
yeah.
the cost range goes, I'm not the cost range can go from about 8 million on the lower end, or 7 million on the lower end, up to 30 million, kind of depending. Because they gave a lot of different
Right.
scenarios. It looked like the average for the windows could be around 14 million. So,
All inclusive, that's probably right.
yeah, with all the electrical and all those pieces.
And Scott, do we have borrowing capacity for a facilities levy?
No, not currently.
When does our,
We can revisit that with legal counsel, but as the debt is being paid down over the course of 30 years, then eventually there will be some debt capacity, but not in the near
We're
near
too
future.
early in the cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can ask that question and get the answer for you.
Thank you, George.
Welcome, George.
So that concludes my component of new business.
Okay,
Is there other-
thank you. I have a different new business. Everyone has before them a proposed resolution in opposition to House Bill 556, which is a bill that has not quite found a committee yet in Columbus.
It will.
Yes, yes, all right. Sigh. This is a bill that has been proposed which would criminalize school librarians and teachers for pandering obscenity to children in schools. Obscene material is not defined in the language of the bill that I could find. There is reference to other definitions of obscenity in other parts of Ohio Revised Code, but it's not quite certain whether those definitions would apply in this case. We took a very strong stand as a district against House Bill 616, 2 years ago, I think it was now, which wanted to limit what teachers could teach based on nebulous things like divisive concepts and racism without defining what those divisive concepts were. I propose that we take a similarly strong stance against House Bill 556 because it disrespects the professionalism of our teachers and our librarians, who we trust to do the right thing for our students. They provide materials that are relevant to our community, to our diverse body of students, and which meet state guidelines for the curriculum that's required that we teach our students. So I sent you all this. I know that it was a bit short notice, but it took me a long time to beat it into shape today. I propose that we read it today, and if there are things that need to be changed, we can table it until I can make edits at our next meeting. Does that seem all right with everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dan, can I impose on you to read?
Sure.
Thank you.
the teacher?
He's got the voice.
Yikes, no pressure there.
Sorry.
A resolution in opposition to House Bill 556. I will also just point out that this is, maybe you mentioned it, that this originated with some folks out of the Toledo Public School District, TPS, and as often is the case, we don't reinvent the wheel every time we adapt the wheel to the districts around the state. Whereas the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education, the board, is committed to our mission of providing a challenging and engaging education to prepare all our students to become responsible citizens and succeed in college and career. And whereas the board is also committed to our vision of educating students by embracing diversity, ensuring equitable experiences, and fostering outstanding teaching and learning to develop academically prepared critical thinkers who contribute positively and compete successfully in the world. And whereas the board is also committed to employing and retaining highly qualified teachers and librarians who use their best educational practices in day-to-day interactions with students. And whereas the Ohio legislature has repeatedly brought politics into the learning environments which the board is charged with creating, often thereby infringing upon the rights of the board, our professional staff, and our students. And whereas the Ohio House of Representatives has proposed House Bill 556, known as HB 556, which would create a fifth-degree felony offense for public school librarians or teachers who create, reproduce, exhibit, present, or provide to students obscene materials for educational purposes. And whereas determining what is obscene material is a legal question, one which school librarians and teachers cannot be expected to answer in their daily activities. And whereas the risk of lengthy retaliatory lawsuits to determine whether materials are indeed obscene under HB 556 will bog down effective teaching and learning. And whereas the risk of fines or prison time will make it even harder for the district to hire and retain highly qualified teachers and librarians. And whereas the Ohio legislature should not criminalize or threaten to prosecute school librarians and teachers for their use of resources designed to meet the diverse needs of our students and community by enacting harmful legislation. And whereas the board provides parents the right to inspect any instructional materials used as part of the educational curriculum for their students through policies 5780 and 9130. Therefore, be it resolved that the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education believes that our state-licensed professional teachers and school librarians are the ones best qualified to make decisions regarding the appropriateness of instructional materials. And be it further resolved that the board strongly opposes House Bill 556 and any other legislation which would criminalize teachers and school librarians with the risk of felony prosecution in the performance of their daily duties. And be it lastly resolved that the superintendent is directed to forward this resolution to the Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives.
Thank you, Dan. Any thoughts, comments? I noticed that you added the ones best qualified in
Okay.
our first, therefore be it resolved, so I'll make that change because
I
I
would
think
like
that's
to
correct.
add the governor to this, so that if this nonsense makes it through, the governor will already be on notice that we would expect him to exercise his veto power.
Thank you.
It will be interesting to see. We have some licensed teachers in the Ohio legislature at the moment. Actually, one recently became a licensed teacher in the state of Ohio, and he will vote for this. But almost all will not. Thank you for doing this work. This is not easy work, even though we do start with a model. I really appreciate your,
You're
I just
welcome.
didn't have the
Yeah, it
bandwidth
is-
for it this week.
It's hard to untangle all the threads of the text of this legislation, and I had to spend a lot of time poking around in revised code to find what they were referring to. And the reality is, they're not actually referring to anything that's in Ohio Revised Code. It was a bit frustrating that way. We get these things in Columbus as part of a national wave of legislation designed to basically shackle the hands of public education all over the country. This isn't the first time, it won't be the last. It is our responsibility as the Board of Education for our community and our students that we stand up and say no loudly in public. And this board has put a lot of time and effort into trying to protect our jobs, right? We represent the wishes of our community, not the wishes of the state legislature. And that's why we were elected, is to make sure that our students get what our community wants.
I think it's also worth pointing out that these things do not happen in isolation.
Nope.
That this is part of now decades an old plan to discredit and dissolve public education in the state of Ohio, and I would argue throughout the country. We are now at a place where there are states for which, in which compulsory education is just sort of a cute idea. We live in a state that is now funding to the tune of well more than $1 billion a year of Ohio taxpayers' money being funneled into, through a number of channels, private education, private schools, who will not be bound by this. We have a ruling party in Ohio that loves to use the terms accountability and transparency, and yet they make a mockery of both of these things because it's Ohio's great public schools that are fully transparent and 100% accountable to their taxpayers. These recipients of $1 billion of our funds are neither. So we can't look at any of this stuff in isolation. This is not an accident.
Right. And a lot of that money, of course, could have been made available to add air conditioning to our buildings. but
Well, you know,
it
when
hasn't been,
when we
so,
talk
right,
about
yeah,
$1
it's
billion a
priorities,
year,
right?
I'm
when-
for a new school, not just fixing an old one.
Okay,
I'm for a
new
school.
buildings.
when we talk about $1 billion a year, what $1 billion a year could look like. Doing dirty math, you're talking about the ability to surge 10,000 teachers into Ohio's public schools with the same $1 billion that we are surging into Ohio's non-accountable, non-transparent private schools. 10,000 teachers. So, I would propose we move forward with the one change, perhaps there's others.
Not for me.
You?
No, no changes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution with the two tiny edits that I have written in blue?
I motion,
No. I move that we move forward with the resolution with the two tiny edits in opposition to House Bill 556.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Can I give you the two tiny edits in blue?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got one small piece of new business, more a proposal for either a work session or discussion in a future meeting. And it's a request to Liz, I'm guessing Liz, for some info. So in the spirit of continuous improvement as we start a new school year, one thing that I get a lot of questions about are, from people I talk to, are enrollment, particularly kindergarten enrollment, and the process by which we enroll new kindergartners and allocate space and teachers and all that stuff, especially, considering the fact that we do have cases where first day of school happens and, a family says, where'd all the kids go? Oh, school. And then enroll their kids, a week in or what have you.
Phil, are you talking about sort of the registration process?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
you have to register particularly for kindergarten. And so what I think I'd love to see, Liz, if we could, and to maybe spur on a conversation, would be the number of registrations before the beginning of the school year by building, and the number of kindergarten, FTEs, like teachers and paras and everything else, by building. And then the number that we get, say, in the 2-3 weeks after the
Is there a
beginning of
data
school.
record? I think that's essentially what you're referring
Yeah.
to, right? Like a data record that's used.
Right. And because, I see this, one, as an equity issue. If we have certain buildings that are more crowded or have different teacher-student ratios, particularly in kindergarten, and then if there's things that we can do to adjust to those factors, if they exist. So less new business for today, probably new business for future meeting.
Can we also add the number of students who enrolled from our pre-K program?
Good.
At that later date?
I'd also like to know what establishes the date of record. Is there something that is the first phone call? And then also I'd like to know on the other end, the amount of time before that date of record, between the date of the first contact and the student being completely enrolled. How long is it taking families?
Just to be clear, can you all clarify date of record? I don't- I
Isn't
don't
there a
understand.
date that we use to kind of like solidify like enrollment, like this is
Oh,
the?
I was thinking something
Yeah,
else.
okay.
Thank you,
Oh,
Liz.
well, that's what I was thinking of,
It's
sorry.
usually like, it settles about the third week or so of school typically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would even like to see before that then, because I thought that was at the beginning of
Beginning.
the first day of school.
So we're all talking about different
Yeah,
dates.
exactly.
This is good. Typical in
So when-
education, right? We've got too many terms.
Yeah, when, the decision about how many kindergarten teachers we need in each building can't wait until the third week of school. That has to be made previous
Well,
April,
sometimes
right,
it-
because of our
Well, when we
contract.
add, we wait because sometimes kids transfer out, so. Because you also have that, you have kids who
Who don't come.
don't come, right? So it's definitely a fluctuating number the first couple of weeks of school. Yep. I can say, our kindergarten enrollment is down from last year, without question. So unless we got a large influx, I think it's matching the birth rate generally, but it's down across the district. At least the last time I checked, which was about 4 days ago.
Well, and our population is decreasing in both of our host cities, all three.
Yep. You see the birth rate piece hitting?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Actually, I think our enrollment is down, but not as far as the population as a whole.
Yeah.
Sorry to hit you with all that.
I think I got it.
Okay. Are we done with new business?
We should do new business at the beginning all the time. This was fun. We had more. Normally you get to new business and I'm like, it's the end of the
Okay.
meeting.
So let's go back to the previous running order. And that will be statements from the audience. And I want to remind people, that statements should be kept to 3 minutes. And you should please refrain from mentioning specific students or employees by name. If your comments involve a student or an employee, the board asks that you please not address that individual by name. We ask that you remain cognizant that we are in open meeting and possibly in the presence of students, whether or not here, perhaps at home. We also, I already said that. Fine, sorry. And we have a lot of people signed up. The first person is Darrell Laushi concerning excessive heat. If you could come up to the podium, please, and speak in the microphone so that your comments are audible to other people elsewhere.
Vice President Lewis, board members, Superintendent Kirby, Treasurer Gaynor. Good evening and thank you for listening. My name is Darrell Lauschie. I am the Title I lead teacher at Garrity Professional Development School and 5th Vice President of the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union. 5 of our elementaries are not fully air-conditioned, and this past week's extreme heat and humidity severely affected the health and well-being of our students and staff. On our second floor, Tuesdays and Fridays highs inside the classrooms topped 91 degrees. By Friday, it was worse with excessive humidity. One of my colleagues shared that going upstairs to their classroom felt like a punch in the gut due to the heat and humidity. The brick walls of our buildings take days to release the heat they absorb. Even today, the classrooms are almost 80 degrees, so even a 40-degree night didn't do much to cool the buildings. This isn't an environment conducive to learning. It's an environment that actively undermines it. Students were seen by our school nurse complaining of headaches, dizziness, nausea, and other symptoms stemming from long exposure to extreme heat. All throughout the school, students could be observed struggling to deal with the heat and insufferable humidity. One teacher remarked at how difficult it was for her students to write on paper with sweat dripping from their heads, arms, and hands, turning the paper into mush. And let's not ignore the teachers. I, for one, left each day with a blinding headache despite drinking about half a gallon of water each day and having a fan blowing on me. My room is on the first floor. Our other colleagues complained of the same symptoms as the students. Several of my peers shared with me that they could not attend their own children's evening events due to the effects that they were experiencing from a day inside of our schools. As a district, we were informed of the steps that were being taken to help mitigate the intense heat and humidity. Principals created plans to rotate classes through cooler areas of the building. Unfortunately, at my school, there just wasn't enough time to fully cool down in the time slots allotted. Students were still exposed to over 5 hours of extreme conditions the rest of the school day. While students were afforded frequent water breaks and a limited number of mini bottles of water was supplied by our district, it wasn't enough to combat the dehydration that results from the extreme heat and humidity. Students remained inside for recess, which was disastrous. Even though these were hot days, the outside temperature was still a couple degrees cooler than inside, and students could have relaxed in the fresh air and shade of a tree during lunchtime. A single district fan is supplied in each classroom. At Garrity, classrooms either have one oscillating fan mounted near the ceiling in the corner of the room or a single ceiling fan with 12-inch blades. These fans are woefully inadequate to circulate the air in a room the size of our classrooms. As per district directive, personal fans are permitted if they're approved by the building administrator and are plugged directly into the outlets. Unfortunately, not one of our classrooms has an outlet near a window that would allow a fan to blow cooler air into the room or blow hot air out of it. We were told that windows were left open overnight to help cool the buildings. The reality is that this did not happen at all at Garrity, plain and simple. The families of our students expect us to care for their children and meet their needs during the time in which they are in our schools. They expect that decisions are made in the best interest of their children. Our students and staff are all human beings with hopes, dreams, emotions, flesh and blood. The failure to provide adequate cooling in schools or to close the buildings without air conditioning during extreme heat is an outrageous oversight and ignores our humanity. We must demand better solutions and meaningful improvements. That is why, at a minimum, a calamity day should be used in the event that temperatures and or heat indices exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lauschie.
Thank you, Joe.
Next up, we have Karen Rigo, also on the topic of heat.
Good evening, VP Lewis and members of the Board of Education and Superintendent Kirby. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to speak. On Friday at 11:51 a.m., our staff received a letter regarding the district's response to the extreme heat conditions on August 27th and 30th suffered by our students and staff. The measures presented in the superintendent's letter, such as providing fans, ensuring water breaks, and keeping students inside for recess, fell far short of what was needed and were not effectively implemented. It is our position that calamity days must be declared when existing or projected weather conditions, such as heat indexes near 90 or above, make the school environment unsafe or unbearable. Even with significant staff absences on Friday, there was still no calamity day called. Teachers were pulled from their positions in other buildings to cover the classes since there were not enough subs. This is not a solution. This created a ripple effect across the district since now those districts were down support people. Going forward, we continue to begin school in the middle of the summer in the extreme heat. Then the following actions need to be taken to prevent these reoccurrences from happening. Number one, use calamity days. We have over 20 for the elementary. when existing or projected weather conditions such as heat indexes near above 90 make school environments just completely unsafe, that has to be done on those extreme days, especially like Tuesday and Friday last week. Those are the only days that you could have called, and this would have been a little more acceptable and palatable to our members and to our students. And if those, in days like today, where it's still very, very warm, we need to make sure that we ensure the classrooms with the appropriate fans. That plan is for a day like today, not a day when it's 90 or above. That's a calamity day. So making sure these fans are, and I think Daryl addressed this, that several teachers at their own expense purchased and brought fans to the buildings. Simply put, despite assurances, contrary to that, the district failed to meet the needs of the fans. And they're just blowing hot air anyway. It's not a solution. Provide adequate cold water. Showing up with cases of warm water for students that are this big, it's just not acceptable. That was just another failed effort. Ensure that windows are open at night. Again, Daryl addressed this. No, that did not happen. And not only that, but it's not safe to keep our buildings wide open for just anyone to walk in through a first floor building. Provide sufficient heat release spaces. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been to Oxford in a minute, but their library was bitterly cold, where to the point you put in sweaty children in that room. That's not appropriate. It's not the answer. And there are spaces to go, but that is not a teaching space. So thank you for listening tonight. And please, we need to do better. Call a calamity day.
Next up, we have Nadine Davis, also on the topic of heat.
Now I know how the students feel when I put a timer on the screen. Good evening, Superintendent Kirby, Vice President Lewis, board members, Treasurer Gaynor, and thank you for listening. My name is Nadine Davis, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at Canterbury Elementary School and the sixth Vice President of the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union. I'm here to speak about a critical issue affecting our students' learning, as you already heard, the safety and efficacy of classrooms where temperatures exceed 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In education, we often focus on academic achievement and innovative teaching methods, but we also must address the fundamental needs that support effective learning. One such need is a safe and comfortable learning environment. The most recent heat index in many of our classrooms at Canterbury, Garrity, Roxborough, Oxford, and Noble Elementary Schools has been far from conducive to this. Let me explain why this is not just a minor inconvenience, but a significant concern. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a theory in psychology, outlines a pyramid of human needs. At the base are physiological needs, such as air, water, and shelter, which are fundamental to our survival. According to this theory, before students can effectively engage in learning, these basic needs must be met. This includes maintaining a comfortable temperature. When classroom heat indexes exceed 80, 90, and sometimes 100 degrees, which it happened, students' physiological needs are compromised. My classroom temperature combined with humidity levels last week met heat indexes in the 90s as early as 8:15 a.m. And many of my other colleagues experienced heat indexes in the hundreds as early as 8:15 a.m. Extreme heat impacts the body in several detrimental ways: heat stress and dehydration, causing excessive dizziness, fatigue, impaired cognitive function, which hampers not only students' focus in learning, but teachers as well. Reduced cognitive function, which impairs cognitive performance, particularly affecting children whose developing brains are more sensitive. This can lower academic performance, and engagement. Physical health risks. Prolonged heat exposure can cause heat exhaustion or heat stroke, with children being especially vulnerable. In fact, 25% of the students in my classroom this year have a medical condition that can be severely impacted by the temperature and the 78% humidity that I had in my classroom last week. For the past decade at Canterbury, I've gone home with heat rashes, headaches, stomach aches from prolonged heat on my second floor classroom at Canterbury, which impacts not only myself, but my family and my children at home. Fourth, behavioral issues. Heat discomfort can increase irritability, frustration, and disrupting interaction with peers and teachers and affecting classroom harmony. Again, if these actions of installing or improving air conditioning cannot happen right now, please call the Calamity Day. Thank you for listening.
Ms. Davis. Next up, we have Tiffany Underheil. The topic is heat.
Good evening, Vice President Lewis, the CHUH School Board, and Superintendent Kirby. My name is Tiffany Underheil. I am a teacher at Roxborough Middle School and the first Vice President of the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union. I am here on behalf of the members who teach in our elementary schools, as well as the many children who learn in our elementary schools. As you know, the environment of a school and classroom is an important aspect when it comes to student learning and achievement. Students need to be comfortable. They need to feel safe, and they need to feel loved in order to be successful. Last week, our district failed to provide our students with a safe and comfortable learning environment. By not calling calamity days on some of the hottest days we have had this year for our 5 elementary buildings that do not have air conditioning. According to Channel 19 News, last week we had a heat index in the high 90s and low 100s on Tuesday and Friday. According to digital thermostats, our classrooms saw temperatures up to 102 degrees. In buildings without air, learning was not taking place despite the best efforts of our teachers. Comments made by central administration about it not feeling that bad did not help. So why were these buildings kept open? I would like to take you back to August 25th, 2021. In fact, I would like to quote the Board of Education's publication that went out to parents regarding this date. Quote, "Due to the excessive and potentially dangerous heat expected for Wednesday, August 25th, the CHUH elementary schools that do not have air conditioning, Canterbury, Garrity, Noble, Oxford, and Roxborough Elementary, will be closed tomorrow. All after-school functions for these schools are canceled for August 25th as well. We have made this decision in order to keep our children and our staff safe." End quote. That's still on our district website, by the way. Would you believe that the heat index for August 25th, 2021 was the same as the one we experienced on Tuesday and Friday last week? I checked. Why was the safety of our children and staff more important 3 years ago than it was last week? According to our EMIS coordinator, Sharon Roller, our elementary schools have more than 20 calamity days each year. Taking 2 heat days when the heat index is in the high 90s, and low 100s would not have put us over our calamity days for the year. It wouldn't have even made it close. So why make our children and our staff work in unsafe working conditions? I am urging you to follow the preamble to the collective bargaining agreement between this district and the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union, which states, quote, "The primary people in our school system are first the students and next the teachers. Accordingly, they will be given primary consideration in any action taken by the Board of Education. Last week, the district should have put our students and teachers first." Thank you.
Next up, we have Angel Fasolo. The topic is a dozen plaintiffs in 2 lawsuits against this district. Clear highlight a pattern of district violations.
In May of this year, local news outlets reported that a federal lawsuit was filed against this district by multiple plaintiffs, naming multiple defendants in alleged Title IX and civil rights violations in this district's response to sexual misconduct. A week later, it was reported a second case had been filed with similar allegations and naming additional defendants. Since then, the district has kept all named employees on the job and even promoted 2 of them to more powerful and more lucrative positions. Neither of these cases have been dismissed by the federal court. Yes, I've mentioned this before. The new news is that more Jane and James Does have come forward, naming additional defendants. There are now 12 plaintiffs naming multiple district personnel in the Board of Education. A dozen plaintiffs who this district allegedly failed and whose civil rights were allegedly violated by this district. This is shameful. I don't know every named defendant, nor can I specifically speak for or against all, but some of the named defendants on the growing list of defendants are known bad apples in this district and have been called out by families and staff for years. Many have had complaints filed against them over and over. At least one of the named defendants has misled the community about their role in this district. At least one of the named defendants is a contracted lawyer who interacts with students, families, and staff and has failed to disclose that they are not a district employee when doing so. At least one of the named defendants was tasked by the district to lead a series of student code of conduct community meetings since being named as a defendant. Multiple named defendants have required me to read passages from the district's own student code of conduct as well as basic state or federal laws and protections they were either unaware of or intentionally violating when I dealt with them on other matters. At least one of the named defendants had multiple complaints and grievances filed against them by the teachers' union. When that went public and was reported, that our now board member Dan Hines publicly commented, quote, "If just one part of this is true, she should be fired for cause, not demoted, not just moved, right away. That person was neither demoted nor fired and today is a named defendant." At least one of the named defendants has made false accusations to local authorities in a seemingly abusive and retaliatory manner. That is something that's allegedly happened to multiple individuals in this community and seems in line with the retaliation claimed in the lawsuit. More than one named defendant is habitually known to be adversarial and special edge in education, even though some are tasked specifically with working in special education matters in this district. At least one defendant has perpetuated such a toxic culture and attitude with respect to race that both new Tiger families and staff, as well as Heights lifelongers of multiple racial backgrounds, have expressed that they've never encountered such a toxic relationship with race in this district. At least 4 of the defendants are people I personally contacted the district and previous board members about. To be clear, my family is not affiliated with any of these cases, nor have I ever filed complaints related to Title IX. Clearly, there is a pattern here.
Thank you, Ms. Fasolo. We respect the right of our community members to express their thoughts, opinions, and points of view during our public comment period. That time belongs to you. But we do find it necessary to address the repeated statements made by some about the district's response to the very sensitive and important matter of the Title IX investigations, particularly regarding the named defendants in the lawsuits. As we have said, we are committed to responding promptly, thoroughly, and equitably to allegations of violent or inappropriate behavior. Equitable treatment also dictates that individuals are not assumed to have engaged in wrongdoing based solely on a case being filed. And this includes not being placed on leave or subject to disciplinary action unless other facts warrant that response. We consistently review information brought to our attention and make appropriate determinations based on that information. These legal matters must be allowed to play out through the appropriate legal channels. I want to be absolutely clear about this. No staff members named in one of these lawsuits is facing accusations that that staff member engaged in sexual harassment or sexual assault. To say or imply that is inaccurate, unfair, and reckless. The next person who has signed up is Daniel Hirschman Rossi on the topic of heat.
Thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Daniel Hirschman Rossi. I'm the music teacher at Noble and Roxborough Elementary. I'm also a Cleveland Heights Teachers Union steward and an extremely proud Cleveland Heights resident and parent to a Fairfax kindergartner. Our family is such a staunch public school family that our 3-year-old on our street that unfortunately has quite a few private school members, whenever she sees a Tiger Nation sign, our 3-year-old says, "Public school alert, public school alert." It's very, very cool. I'm here, of course, to address the severe heat issues at Noble, Canterbury, Oxford, Garrity, and Roxborough. This isn't a new problem. On May 23rd, 2024, I wrote to Superintendent Kirby about the extreme heat at Noble. It was the person you mentioned earlier, highlighting concerns for both teacher and student health, including cases of vomiting and nausea. We did receive a prompt and courteous response, but the only action taken was the delivery of, again, 2 warm cases of bottled water the following day after the temperatures had dropped. However, we hope that that action, while perhaps more a gesture than an actual solution, represented a genuine interest in actually addressing the heat. And a few weeks ago, when Superintendent Kirby visited the schools and spoke to teachers during opening day PDs, there was a vow to monitor the heat in the buildings. And once again, we were really hopeful that this meant that our concerns would finally be taken seriously when the temperatures inevitably, again, rose in August and May. So as you surely already know, of course, the heat climbed to ridiculous levels last week, hitting 95 degrees on Tuesday and nearly as high on Thursday and Friday. I witnessed this in firsthand in both the non-air conditioned buildings where I teach. Once again, we saw students becoming lethargic, nauseous, restless. Many went home early. Some didn't come to school. In a first grade music class I had on Tuesday the 27th, I had an overstimulated, overheated child roll into a ball and simply say, "I want to go home to my mommy and daddy." Although many of you before us sit in air-conditioned offices during the day, please imagine for a moment that you are teaching a class of 25 7-year-olds in a 90-degree room. Imagine what can actually be learned in a condition like that. And the answer is nothing at all. Students can't focus on learning when their basic needs aren't met. Hands-on activities like STEM or music or gym are impossible when moving around the room is exhausting due to the heat. Students are unable to play outside, become restless and distracted, and most alarmingly, the health of both our children and our staff suffer. Obviously, there's a clear need for air conditioning systems in these buildings. That need, of course, will not go away, and in fact, as we all recognize, thankfully, those realities will continue to get worse because of climate change. In the meantime, we need to use our calamity days as they were intended and close these buildings when the heat index rises above 90 degrees. It is time to prioritize student health. Thank you very much.
The last person who has signed up is Paula Goodwin from the League of Women Voters. Concerning the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. My name is Paula Goodwin. Many of you know my face because I come here regularly to observe the board meetings on behalf of the League. Today, I just want to make an announcement that on Thursday, September 12th, the Cleveland Heights University Heights chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland, in partnership with the Heights Libraries, will present a voter education forum on election disinformation and artificial intelligence entitled Disinformation, AI, and Elections, How to Separate Fact from Fiction in 2024. The forum will be free and open to the public and will take place on September 12th from 7 to 8:15 p.m. at the Cleveland Heights Community Center. Speakers will be Dean Jackson, a researcher specializing in democracy, media, and technology, and Lee Jordan, a respected news anchor and award-winning journalist. We hope many of you will be able to attend this important subject matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this concludes statements from the audience. Next up, we have approval of the consent agenda.
Before you do that, I just want to thank all of our teachers for stopping in tonight and advocating for your membership as well as for the students in your classrooms.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
I move that we,
Sorry.
Into the mic, Dave,
I
please.
move that we consider the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second that?
Thank you. We have a whole long list of minutes from previous meetings. As I always say, they looked shockingly familiar. I didn't catch any glaring omissions.
I looked through them pretty carefully. I didn't see anything.
Okay. Anything else?
No donations this time.
There were no donations to
bummer.
be recognized and
It's
thanked.
one of the sections I always look for first, and I was like,
Yeah.
Field trips.
yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
know. We'll get lots of field trips next month, I'm sure. Okay. We did have 2 resolutions declaring transportation impractical, which Mr. Gaynor has taught us is frequently used when we just cannot provide public transportation school bus transportation for small numbers of students going to schools that are far out of the known routes. We put an enormous amount of effort into creating bus routes to get kids to where they need to be, and sometimes it just can't be done.
Within a reasonable amount of time, in
Yes,
particular.
right, because who wants to get on a school bus at 6 in the morning? And I believe you're going to be talking about that later in three things, correct?
There was a transportation item, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I would assume that we're busing more CHUH students than we are.
Significantly more.
I knew it was the case last year. I hadn't asked this year yet. But
Yeah.
I would assume so. So there's still a lot of
Wait
busing
with bated
happening.
breath until
Yeah.
the end of the meeting. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Trimble?
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Kirby, I turn it over to you for your update, please.
Okay, I'm going to ask Caitlin if she can project for me, please. So this update is for the month between our August meeting and our meeting today. We began, actually, the month of August with an orientation for our students in the class of 2028. They engaged in a week-long celebration Monday through Thursday where they learned the ins and outs of the building, met with teachers, learned about the high school and the requirements of the high school, heard from a panel of students and teachers about high school and successfully navigating high school. I want to give a shout out to Ms. Perry, the ninth grade administrator who led the planning, and her freshman success team that have been working all summer to support our students as they go into their first year. Overall, there were over 300 students that attended and over 200 parents that attended the parent component of that meeting, so that was a great success. We were also able to have training on Character Strong, which is our new SEL curriculum. So training occurred for our pre-K teachers, paraprofessionals, counselors, psychologists, alternative learning center leads, ancillaries, middle school teachers, and high school self-contained teachers during the beginning of the year. So Character Strong, this has been a year in planning in terms of selecting the curriculum, and implementation is happening this year. We also, on August 19th, had an opening climate day. And so during this day, we were able to give the opportunity for staff to delve into topics like social emotional learning, cultivating a sense of belonging and mattering, trauma-informed practices, and methods to improve and maintain student attendance. These were, in most instances, staff-led, and so staff were able to hear from each other in terms of structures and strategies in order to create, cultivate, and sustain a supportive environment. So again, this is a day, just as a reminder, that we have added for professional learning for the past 3 years since COVID, and we find it to still be really helpful. In terms of community partnerships, the Resource and Wellness Fair was held on August 10th, 2024 from 11 to 1. It was a great event. We had over 600 folks who signed in to that event. Again, I want to thank board members for supporting this and volunteering. There are 25 partner organizations. We were able to give out backpacks to 300 students and gave away quite a bit of clothing to families as well. So as it relates to things like Maslow's hierarchy of need, I think this is a resource that we try to support, provide to families as they start the school year so that they get off to a strong start, and also give an opportunity to network and get connected to our partner organizations that are also here to support families. On in Goal 4, we held both our new staff orientation, where just about every department in the district did provide an onboarding and training for our new staff. And then a week later, we had our annual convocation where we welcome back staff. Our theme for this year is Heights United, and we had a student DJ, we had a student speaker, we had school cheers who were competing. Just had a good time to get the school year kicked off. And then finally, just upcoming for this month, tomorrow is curriculum night at the elementary schools. It's hard to believe that we have homecoming. coming pretty early this year, next week, September 13th. And our board work session on September 24th will be centered around goals 1, 2, and 3. That is 6:30 p.m. on September 24th. So that concludes my update for the month.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby.
If I could, there were a couple things that I just think are worth another minute.
Okay.
I think that the ninth grade welcome at Heights High was fantastic. I heard so many great reflections on folks being there, both from new students and from the existing students who were serving sort of as big brother, big sister mentors. You know, we need to remember that there are so many layers when we do events like that we're offering our older students an opportunity to develop their leadership, their communication skills. It's simply fantastic. I love all of the work that we do around there. There is, you know, all of the transition years. When you're your first year in middle school, your first year in high school, I always use the boogeyman analogy that families and kids always think that the boogeyman is lurking around every corner, and it's just a universal at every school. And events like this take the boogeyman out of the scenario, and it's just fantastic. And then the resource and wellness fair at Delisle was so much more than I expected it to be. It was huge. And
We
so-
ran out of all
Yes.
sorts of things. We
Yes.
ran out of food, we ran out of book bags, we ran
Right.
out of winter
And,
coats, we ran out of everything.
Yeah, Nancy has set the bar for a repeat there pretty high.
Yeah, I enjoyed working the CHUH boutique, as I called it, and I got many students to say yes to the code. So it was a great experience, mingling with families and students.
Yeah, I was floating in a couple different volunteer positions, and I think one of my favorites was walking in and seeing Gabe in her element, working with kids and families. That was, you could tell you're having a blast. So that was really great. Yeah, and what a awesome day. I mean, that's quickly becoming one of my favorite district events, and it was the second annual. And the first was a lot more grassroots, I'll say. It didn't have as much of the professional touch that the team put on it this year with, you know, going back
Sponsors,
and
we had
sponsors and, yeah, I mean, and thanks to the
Anthem,
Anthem,
yeah.
the sponsor for that, because they really, I mean, they paid for the food, I think, is that?
Yeah, they did.
They
And-
brought
and-
in the food truck.
And the tents, there's a couple of really large tents that partners were able to use, and so, yeah, I mean, just what a great day. Just love it.
Yeah, we've already gotten some commitments for sponsorships for next fall or
That's
summer,
wonderful.
so that's good.
And we're going to need more than 300 book bags. So,
A third food truck.
yeah. Wonderful.
Good problem to have.
Mr. Gaynor, you're up with three things.
Thank you. So under the treasurer's report, we have the three things for the month of September. Again, for a viewing audience, this is an effort to inform and educate all stakeholders regarding district finances and school funding in Ohio, Goal 5, Objective 3. So really, it's just providing three different finance or school funding concepts that people can hopefully take in and have as a reference in the future. So we do put all of these out on the district website after each presentation, so the full history of the three things sits there. So the first thing we have is the STARS rating. We have touched on this under public records requests, but it's never been its own thing, so we did pull that out because we just had some news about that. So the STARS rating is the Auditor States program, where they want to acknowledge government entities or governmental entities who are meeting or exceeding Ohio public records and sunshine laws. So they have this system in place, 0 to 4 stars. You get 1 star if you're compliant, and you can get up to 3 additional stars if you've implemented best practices. And you see the 7 best practices included there, which really is just making sure you have an online presence, that you've designated someone to track the request, you have acknowledgements, you know, that just things that make public records requests easier for the community and also demonstrate the transparency that we're trying to achieve there. So you see that next to the last bullet there. So our district for fiscal '23 received 4 stars and met all 7 best practices for the Auditor State rating. And then we've included the website there, Auditor State Stars, which you can click on and you can see any entity and you can see the history of what any district or city government has achieved in terms of the stars rating. Any questions about that? All right. So the next item we have is totally switching gears, but was top of mind because we were working with a CTE budget, is the Carl Perkins grant. So one of the things that we really haven't talked to about the board with or brought forward, well, we did in the context of the CTE presentation and the various buckets of funding under CTE, but wanted to put this concept out there and memorialize it into 3 things. So this is federal funding that we receive under the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century, or the Perkins 5 Act. And you see it has a specific purpose. It's intended to develop academic knowledge and employability skills of secondary and post-secondary education students who elect to enroll in career and technical education programs. Perkins funds must be used to support Ohio Department of Education approved career and technical education programs. And some of the allowable uses of funds you see we've listed here. There are several more, but there are a lot of restrictions with this grant as well. In fact, it seems like more restrictions than actual allowable uses. But it's all out under ODE's website in terms of what is allowed and what is not. But you can see, career exploration activities, professional development, equipment, as long as it's for improved instruction. And our district's allocation for fiscal '25 is $464,000 for those purposes.
Now, there is also state money that is intended specifically for CTE.
Correct.
And that's got a different name.
Correct. So there is, there's foundation funding that's designated and driven by enrollment for career and technical education. There's also career awareness and exploration funding that is embedded in the state funding formula. So this is a federal grant that is kind of layered on top of
So
all
it's a
of that.
separate pot
It
of
is,
money.
correct.
And if I remember correctly, it's to supplement, not supplant, right? That's the
Yeah,
language I
that's
remember reading
correct.
years ago.
Well, mostly with staffing, but yes. So
Yes.
once you have staff, so you can use a small amount of this budget, 5% for administration, for staffing. But with any federal grant, once you're never allowed to, you can only supplement your existing programs. You can't take an existing employee and supplant that person in the grant.
Right.
So that's always a problem.
Not to open a can of worms on this, but how does this play into the consortium, and how is that navigated with multiple districts receiving funds and then consorting together?
Correct. So our CTE director actually manages the Perkins funds and Liz can jump in on this one if I'm misspeaking here, but manages the Perkins money for each individual district. So each district gets its own Perkins funds, and then the director, which is Joe Nicholas this year, would manage the Perkins expenditures for each. But each district monitors their own Perkins money in the consortium. Any other questions on that? And I'm sure this concept will come back around again because, as we continue to talk about CTE and the consortium and the programming, but wanted to have that out there as its own item. And then, so as Phil kind of foreshadowed, and this is actually a result of a question that Dan asked a little while ago, we have the T1 report. And so what is that? Well, it's a Ohio Department of Education annual requirement, and the purpose of this T1 report is for districts to certify the actual number of pupils transported and the total daily miles traveled. So it's used by ODE in funding calculations, and to the question and the point that was made earlier, and George, you can correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think this is where we landed with Scott Smith. These are current numbers, so public school employees 1,154 routed this year, and non-publics 1,565 routed. So just so you have a kind of a feel for what that looks like.
Right. And we are required by the state to provide transportation for the non-public students.
Correct.
And that's been going on for decades.
Forever, yes.
Are these riders, or does this include in payments in lieu of?
These are all, well, these numbers are routed.
Just
So
riders?
they're just the kids on
Just
the bus.
riders?
Yeah. So any payment in lieu of would be separately
So,
reported.
Ballpark
I
on,
guess.
on that number?
I don't have that number, but I can
Well,
get
there
it
were
for you.
15 earlier in the
right,
agenda today.
I'd like to get that number.
But the total number is much larger.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'd like to get the dollar amount associated with that number.
Can do.
So, just to add a little Heinz commentary, the state of Ohio used to reimburse some of the money that we spend transporting students to private schools. The current biennial budget offers no money toward that goal. So that is all out of the tax dollars that are designated to support the public education of CHUH students. The state of Ohio used to also underwrite the cost of replacing the buses. That is also no longer in the budget. So we are, more than half of our transportation budget is now being used to educate, to transport students to non-publics. And all of that money, 100% of that money is coming out of the pot that we have to educate CHUH students with. And I would just sort of remind the community that we are looking at our next biennial budget. Ohio operates on a 2-year budget, and that budget will expire at the end of this June. And it is a legal requirement, the constitutional requirement of the Ohio legislature to have a new budget, new 2-year budget in place on the 1st of July, if I'm right. They failed, shocker, in that last go-around. Remember, schools have to operate on a 5-year budget. That is law passed by the Ohio legislature, which was not able to fulfill its legal responsibility to provide the citizens of Ohio a 2-year budget on their own schedule. But this is a really good time for folks to start thinking about specific line items that could really benefit districts like ours. And I think that the return of funding for non-public students in terms of the transportation of those kids to their schools is a completely reasonable ask. And I think that the return of the subsidies for bus replacements is another really good, because there's years of history where they did that and it was successful and it was good. So nobody could say that that's a crazy ask from the legislature to return traditional funding to the districts. I think those are two really good targets for lobbying efforts that might actually make some headway. So, thank you for that, Scott.
And to Dan's point, we are in the process of preparing to advocate for the last 2 years of the Fair School Funding Plan to be phased in the next biennial budget as well. So,
Critically important, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep, so those
We'll
efforts
see.
are already starting. We'll see what happens.
Now, it's also worth pointing out that the legislature that initially passed the Fair School Funding Program, is it a third of those people? Only a third of those people would still be in the legislature due to term limits that are voting to pass the next biennial budget, so.
A lot of re-education, yes, absolutely. And then again, we have the link there for our folks for the history of the 5-year forecast on the district website, so.
And I'll repeat
Thank you.
that school board members in other districts have found your 3 things to be very useful and are asking their treasurers to come up with something similar, so.
And I will point out that even though you put a question slide up there, it doesn't stop us from asking you questions throughout.
It does not, and you may ask questions at any time, absolutely, you're all good.
Thank you. Board president's report. Well, we don't have a board president today, but I have a very brief vice president's report. A lot of it has already been mentioned. The freshman celebration on the Friday after the small subsections of freshmen did their orientations at the high school was a magnificent party. Ms. Perry is to be commended for everything that she's done to welcome the incoming ninth graders and their families and get everybody ready for a fantastic school year. That was just, it was great. And the official grand opening of the Heights Family Resource Center was
Bless you.
beyond fantastic. You know, we ran out of book bags, we ran out of food, we ran out of everything that we had to provide for families,
It
and
made cleanup really easy.
it certainly did, yes. There were a lot of empty cardboard boxes to flatten. And that's, the Family Resource Center is key to what we do as a district. We need to make sure that our students and our families have what they need to be successful in school, and it starts with stuff outside of school, right? So this is the sort of partnership that helps us give our students the best chances of success academically, is by making sure they have what they need outside of school. The new staff orientation was very energizing. It was just wonderful to be able to welcome our new employees, and the breakfast was amazing. Thank you, AVI. The kindergarten kickoffs were also a lot of fun, and that's a partnership that happens every year with Family Connections. I hope you hear the word partnership coming out of my mouth often. This is how we get more done, is by partnering with other organizations in the community. I was very sad to miss the summer graduation this year and convocation, but I had other more fantastic things going on with my family, so that was my excuse for being out of town for those two events. As already was mentioned, the curriculum night is tomorrow night. Roxelle PTA is hosting a big cookout for all of their families in conjunction with curriculum night. And I suspect that other PTAs are doing things, I just haven't been officially invited to them. And the last thing I want to talk about is market days. We distribute produce to anyone in the community for free once a month at each of 3 buildings, Oxford Boulevard and Garrity. These food distributions are a partnership with the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. And you don't have to have children in the district to come and pick up a box of produce. The produce varies, obviously, depending on what's available, but it's always delicious, it's always fresh. We just had a market day pickup this afternoon, earlier today at, help me out, it was Garrity today. And next week, no, I'm sorry, it was Boulevard today. Next week, Thursday, the 12th of September, there will be a market day at Garrity, and then the next one at Oxford will be on Tuesday, the 17th of September. They always coincide with pickup time at the end of elementary school, so you can come by anytime between 2:30 and 4 and receive a box of free food. And I want people to understand that this is part of what we do and who we are as a district. We are always trying to make up for what's missing in kids' lives so that they can be successful. And sometimes it's food, and sometimes it's coats, and sometimes it's book bags. And sometimes it's just playing games in the grass and the sunshine and making friends with the new kindergartners. But all these things matter. So, thank you. Do we have any committee reports?
I have one. The Heights Schools Foundation, which is, just for those who are unaware, is our alumni association. The Heights Schools Foundation Board of Directors met this week, and just sort of putting a distant date in people's heads. It's easy to remember, it's 6/20/26, and this will be the gala celebration of Heights High's Jubilee. 100 years of Heights High at Cedar and Lee. And so there will be a party held celebrating Heights High at Cedar and Lee that will be, I can promise you, unlike any party that has taken place at Heights High in the past, I can guarantee this.
So this is the 20th of June, 2026?
Yes, 6/20/26. You do it other way.
I do it the wrong way around,
You
but
do it the wrong way around. I'm
I
glad
get
we've
it.
established that.
It's fine, okay.
Your month day is the only true way to write a date. But
Actually, I buy your system first. Yeah.
It's the computer way. So yeah, the Heights Schools Foundation is already planning this great celebration, and it'll be pretty special. So
Great.
more to come on the Jubilee.
We hit new business. Any unfinished business?
I think we shouldn't pass a regular meeting without bringing up the Monticello rename. So I'd love an update at a future meeting. Don't mean to put anybody on the spot for tonight, but just keeping the conversation going.
I actually met with the person who led the Cleveland process recently, and we also have a meeting scheduled with the consultant that's going to work with us, so it should be moving along.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Correspondence and announcements that we haven't hit already.
I have a little. I don't know where this fits. Perhaps it's under new business, and if that's where it fits, then forgive me.
Well, we're done with new business, so it has to be correspondence and
Okay,
announcements.
correspondence. I just don't feel right about having a meeting and not recognizing the tragedy that our community was one of the communities that lost a former student this week. And so I just wanted to take a moment and recognize the loss of Christian, who is a young man I didn't have the pleasure of knowing, but I know that he's a tiger and that he has a family who loves and misses him. And so I just thought we ought to recognize that loss. The city of Euclid had a tough week as well, and I've been communicating with a friend of mine who's on their board, and it's another example of just sort of this gun-drunk culture that we live in, and there's just too many of them, and I'm very proud of the work that we've begun to dip our toe into here to offer our students sooner, hopefully than later, some curriculum around gun safety, because unfortunately our kids will be growing up in a world where there are more guns than people. And so we will be trying to do our best by our kids to help prepare them to occupy that world in a way that will be more safe for them. And then as far as communications, we have had this week and the week prior a few communications from citizens inquiring again, unfortunately again, I think we're going on year number 3 of agains, about access to Cleveland Heights High's beautiful pool for community members in the months when our city pools are not available. And seeking an explanation for that. And I just want to reiterate to the community my eagerness and the fact that I share their frustration in the fact that after years and years of this being available and rather easy, it has become seemingly impossible. The Board of Education, I believe all members of the Board of Education in the past, and I'll certainly let people speak for themselves this evening, have expressed eagerness to make the pool available. Ohio law does not allow the Board of Education to spend funds on endeavors that are not directly related to the education of the students in our care. Opening and staffing the pool for public swim is not directly related to the education of the students in our care, and therefore we are not allowed to pay money to do that. The city of Cleveland Heights has historically been eager to step in and make that incredible facility available to our citizens. And basically, we turn the keys of the pool over to the city during given hours. The city then steps in, sells passes, hires lifeguards, and the pool is available to our residents. The current mayor has, despite being invited by the schools to do it, the current mayor has not done it. The current mayor has not done it despite being directed by the Cleveland Heights City Council to make it happen. The current mayor has not done it despite Cleveland Heights City Council setting aside the funds to do it. And I will say just yet, because I believe yet is an important piece. I will remain hopeful that this will happen, but I will encourage citizens to contact the current mayor of Cleveland Heights and encourage him to return to our citizens access to Cleveland Heights High's beautiful pool, as mayor after mayor after mayor after mayor before the current mayor were perfectly capable and willing to do. I don't know if anybody else
Well,
wants to speak.
I really hope that we are able to form a partnership
Yes.
with the city and the schools to open the pools. Lifeguarding was my first job for the city of Cleveland. I worked at several pools over the summer throughout the city. I love to swim, but also you could get a job at 15, and it paid more than any of my peers were making at the time. So it was something that I really enjoyed. It's where I first learned how, different pots of money like OPERS comes out of your check. So even as a teenager, so I just hope that, we're also able to provide that experience to a young person. I think it also, gives hope to community members who don't have students in the schools. It makes them feel a part of Tiger Nation, and I just would love for us to be able to cultivate that relationship with our community who may feel a little disconnected from the schools.
And to live a healthier life in
And-
the winter months when it's hard to do that.
And it was a promise which the school board made when we were floating that very large bond issue for, rebuilding the high school and getting rid of 2 skanky pools and building one beautiful new one, is that it would be available for winter swim when it's not being used by students.
It
And
was for
there's-
years.
Right, and that was the standard mode of operation, and it needs to come back. I've lost count of the number of times I've had this conversation with members of city council, members of the public, and the level of frustration is just too high right now. And I hear that there are people in swimsuits who attended this evening's city council meeting. So I look forward to watching that later on YouTube.
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
So a lot of well, first off, I'll echo everything that's been said. I desperately want the community swimming in that pool. It's funny, I'm thinking about the food boxes you talked about. We used to say when I worked at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, that the food doesn't do any good in this building. The food needs to go out and be in the hands of other people because it's being wasted in a building. And I think the same thing of the pool. The pool right now, I'm assuming, is sitting empty, and that's a shame. So I want to acknowledge that from the top. But the conversation that I've had with a number of community members, because it's the natural time to have this conversation, because I believe Cumberland closes.
They just closed.
Just closed this
Yeah.
past weekend? So it's what's on everyone's
Well,
mind.
yesterday was the last
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, everyone's talking about swimming, right? And what I've said, and this is speaking for me as a single board member, not the views of the board, a lot of the conversation has been around, can we do this? Can we legally essentially run a community rec program out of Miramar? And I've personally pushed back and said, it is my opinion, as a single board member, that that is not our business. Our business is educating students, and I was not on the board when we passed the bond. I did vote for it, yes. But when that board made a commitment to the community, my understanding of that was that we have made the pool available to the community, and the small print under there is through the city's rec department, because they sell pool passes. I mean, if we were to do this, we would have to like go out and buy equipment to get in the business of selling pool passes, which as a board member, I would say would be a improper use of funds when, as we've heard lots of discussion today, there are other things we can be spending our money on than running a rec department when a rec department exists in the bounds of our city. A lot of the discussion has been on Cleveland Heights. I would love for my sister and brother-in-law to take their young children who are not school-aged yet and be able to do swimming lessons in our pool, like I did with my daughter at the old pool at Heights. So I really do think that there's a way forward. I love it's if, you know, no, not if, what was it?
Yet.
Yet, there, thank you, Dan. Which, there's a lot of power in that word.
There is.
And I really do hope that we can find the partnership. I mean, this, you know,
Well,
this should be easy.
the City of University Heights and the CHUH library system have already offered to work in partnership with the City of Cleveland Heights to make it happen. Our job as a school district is to make the pool available when it's not being used by students, which we have already offered to do innumerable times.
For years.
And partnership, you know, it needs to happen.
I don't think she would mind me saying this, because I think she probably would have said it herself had she been here. But when a community member emailed the entire board this question, and I was talking to Jody, and Jody said, you know, I would love to swim in this pool. I've never swam in it. And Jody pays to go swim at, I think, Tri-C or
Goes to
somewhere.
Tri-C in the
Yeah.
winter, yep.
And she said, I would love nothing more than to swim in the pool. So, I mean, like, the president of the Board of Education can't swim in the pool at the high school because she can't buy a pool pass to do so. It's right there.
Yeah, and you know, the missed opportunities, it seems to me, is the city employed a bunch of lifeguards. I mean, that would have been the time to say,
And
hey.
an awful lot of those lifeguards are
our
Heights High
students,
students, right?
And
who
it just would have been
Lifeguard when
so-
they're not swimming and
It would
diving
have
and
been so
competing.
natural to say, who wants to transition into
The winter season.
the winter season?
I did it.
There you go. So, but again, I mean, you know, those records, those phone numbers are not lost. It's just a matter of reaching out and, you know, hopefully we'll be able to make it happen once we reach a critical mass of will.
Yeah, and a swimming pool is extraordinarily expensive to build and extraordinarily expensive to operate and maintain.
But it's there.
So yes,
Use it
the
up.
more hours of the day there's a body swimming in that water, the better, so.
Would it take a city versus Board of Ed, you know, relay or something? Like, what's it gonna take? It's
Not gonna happen. I do a mean doggy paddle and that's about it.
Okay. I'm assuming we're done here.
That's everything from me.
May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Oh, can I just also mention that there's a tailgate this
Oh.
Friday for the
Yeah.
Heights Athletic Booster, so please register and participate
And parade, community parade, isn't that?
the weekend, the week after.
yeah.
That's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
The following, the
Homecoming.
homecoming parade is on the 13th.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Is
the,
your home game Friday?
Oh, yeah, we're playing those rascally Hornets from Hudson.
Great.
but that's not this weekend. Hudson is the 13th.
Isn't that this weekend? I thought,
I
no.
believe there's,
Or is
Yeah.
Hudson
This
the
Hudson this
6th?
yeah,
Who?
Brunswick is the
Brunswick
following weekend.
is the following weekend.
Okay, I have
Yes.
them mixed up.
Okay.
Bees versus Hornets, right? Is that the, yeah.
Still don't beat a tiger.
Still don't beat it. Just get a little
Okay, so this Friday, the 6th, we're playing against
Hudson.
Hudson. And we have a tailgate beforehand. The following Friday, the 13th, we're playing against Brunswick.
Brunswick.
And we have a homecoming parade down the street, which we will all be participating in.
In some manner, I think we're
Somehow,
going to be
yeah.
marshals perhaps at this one.
Oh, that's good.
And then that would culminate in a tailgate.
Okay.
And then there'll be another tailgate, I'm sure, and there will be a contest for costumes, and we know that transportation will win, but it's
Oh,
not
no,
rigged.
no.
They didn't
Is there-
last year.
Transportation,
They win last
yeah,
time,
they got their, yeah,
There's
but they'll be
competition.
back.
Okay. All right, and then that will be the official homecoming game on the 13th. Okay,
But
Thank
not the
you.
dance.
but not the dance, because the
Dance
dance
is
is on
Saturday.
Saturday. Sigh. I'm glad I don't have to chaperone those anymore. Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I motion we adjourn this wonderful meeting.
I second.
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Heights,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble,
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw.
Yes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, I couldn't find the administrative policy. I just found reference to